All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the next slot of breakout sessions, and I'm with John Fleischauer. I'm stepping in as a host for this session. So it's good to be here. I'm going to introduce John. It's great to have John here, actually. I've known John for a couple of years now. And of course, John is very well known as being, Big Tall John, because, when I first met the guy, a couple of years ago in Toronto, down on King Street, walking up to him, and I'm only 5'8", so he's about a foot taller, than me. But you know what? I felt like I was back in my old sort of high school basketball days, where I was the shortest player on my team. But yes, in fact, right, Sarah, you're absolutely correct. So as I mentioned, it's great to have John here, and John, believe it or not, is went to school for biomedical technology. So what does that have to do with our theme of the conference, today? Nothing. Which is fine, because that's not what John does now. John's a recruiter, and he runs or co-runs a company called Pivot and Edge, which is actually one of my favorite up-and-coming, recruitment marketing company based in Ottawa, and which is our nation's capital, for my fellow Americans. And, so John's going to talk to us a bit about how to engage employees from the inside out. So don't forget that if you have questions for John, which we'll moderate a Q&A session in 30 minutes time, please post your questions in the Q&A, and we can bring you up on stage to ask a question, and chat, obviously, in the chat box. So thank you very much, John, for being here. It's great to have you, and the floor is yours.
So Jeff, I appreciate the intro. A couple things to note. I have never really played basketball, so I am tall. I am not that coordinated, but appreciate the intro either way. So thanks everyone for showing up and spending your time with us today. I've done a lot of speaking gigs. I have to say this is the first time I've done a speaking gig while not wearing pants. That's not to say I'm not wearing shorts, but it's just kind of fun to live in a world where we can kind of engage in our own homes and work from home and not live at work, sort of thing. So clearly, everything this event is all about is employee engagement. And from my perspective, just to tell you where my biases are, Jeff kind of mentioned that we're in the recruitment marketing world. I'm in the camp of it's far more important and impactful to attract the right people to your organization as opposed to convince them to join you. So everything I'm sharing today it's a very, very tactical, simple to execute sort of strategy on how you can engage your employees from inside to outside. But I think it's important to note that employee engagement, at least from my perspective, it really shouldn't be the goal. It really should be the expectation. So as HR professionals, especially during COVID, we've all had to grow and evolve over the last year and kind of figure out the whole new dynamic and all that kind of stuff. But we all know the benefits of engaged employees from a business perspective, from a customer outcome perspective, all that kind of stuff. But I'm in the camp of assuming we have engaged employees, what can we really do with that? So you'll hear me refer to employee insiders, and I'll get into that and what that really looks like. But this is meant to be something that you can take away straight away, and it's not going to cost you any money. It's just a matter of a process, a 5-step process that you can execute tomorrow if you want. And we've seen this work 30, 35 times within specifically seed and Series A funded startups and that kind of thing. So if there's any questions, feel free to fire away anytime. Happy to chat today or beyond. So I don't know about you, but I'm kind of sick of hearing about the programs that Google and Tesla and Amazon and Netflix, even IBM are running, because they have unlimited resources and they're just not applicable to every company. So there's that phrase, no one ever got fired for choosing IBM. That's great. One thing that we do need to acknowledge, though, is that Google and Apple and IBM, they all have distinctive stories. They all have distinctive brands. They're very magnetic. They draw in tons and tons of people. But what you have in common with them is your organization also has a very distinct cultural DNA. You also have a brand promise, and you also have employee stories to share. So just because Google has tons of money and you may not, that doesn't mean that you can't execute on strategies that will ultimately help your business, that they can as well. And they all kind of center on the DNA, the promise, and the stories in general. So let's get right into it. How do I get my employees more engaged, not just at their job, but actually in sharing content? And sharing stories and overall helping increase the visibility to your organization. And I think everyone in this room knows that it's really important to have a positive work environment, a positive work culture. Certainly employer brand is important, your reputation in the market, what your employees and what people perceive your employee experience to kind of be and feel. So if you haven't really looked at your messaging since COVID started, you may want to look at that. But at the end of the day, to have an engaged employees, you need to have a positive culture. But to get them more engaged in helping increase the visibility of your company, it's also important to really have clear objectives and goals that support business initiatives, and you're not just chasing after glamour metrics like likes and follows and that kind of stuff. And if you are to implement some sort of program to facilitate this, I've seen a lot of organizations really have like a prescriptive sort of strategy in terms of trying to get employees to share stuff. So I've seen email chains saying, here's some copy, please copy paste this, upload this image and share this on LinkedIn, share this on Facebook, tweet this, hashtag that. If you're going to try and implement a program to really take those engaged employees or employees in general and get them inspired and educated and empowered to help spread your word, it's really important to make sure that you have a really easy process to actually get buy-in to do that. We can walk through some of the benefits both to the employees and the employer, and then look at things like consistency on communication and the impact of the efforts overall. So I think we all know that there's different reasons why this is important to the business. Maybe you're struggling to get more qualified applicants in your funnel. Maybe you're looking to improve your sourcing efficiency. There's tons and tons of recruiters sending the same message to the same candidates, and it's really hard to stand out. So maybe improving on how you source talent is important to you. Maybe you have a retention problem. Maybe it's something where you want less people exiting the business with that knowledge and trust that you've built up over the years. Maybe it's more on the business development side of things. I know it's weird to talk about how HR can really impact sales, but building up your following as an organization builds up your ability to reach more net new customers as well. And maybe it's a matter of saving money on marketing. I know I have this conversation probably 3 times a week. LinkedIn is outstanding at making money. Maybe it's time to kind of look for strategies to figure out ways that you can organically build processes and systems that won't require you to spend a bunch of money on advertising. So knowing that your employees are your most valuable resource, there's ways that you can take that engagement and the work that you've put towards creating that positive work environment to really help the business overall. So how do you start? And what I suggest is you really take a look inside first. When I say, do you have a brand promise? If I were to ask you that question today, and I were to ask you that question 15 months ago, if you don't have the same answer, you may want to look at that, because the world of work has changed. We're living at work now. How has your organization responded to the pandemic, and what are you doing, and what is the experience that you're providing? What's the environment that you're creating? Do you really have a strong company culture? Have your values and belief systems changed since we've all been locked inside? And if you are to create some sort of simple systematic program to really take that power of the engagement that you've created and use it for good, who would you really want in that program first? And I'll give you an analogy here. I think cats and dogs. Dogs, I love both, by the way. Dogs give you unconditional love, and they will come up to you, they'll cuddle you, they'll do tricks for food. You can rub their belly, all that kind of stuff. Cats are waiting for you to die so they can eat you in their sleep. and they will come to you when they want. And the difference between a cat and a dog, and I do have a cat, by the way, the difference between cats and dogs is the one is going to do no matter what you want them to do, just because they love you. Whereas a cat is only going to act on what they want to act on. So if you're going to roll out a program, it's really important to make sure that you're rolling out that program in a way that it's going to have success in the DNA of it in the first place. And that's something that we can take a deeper dive into as well. Just as an example, there's a big difference between the total reach of a company versus the total reach of employees. So specifically on LinkedIn, this is just an example with Boast AI. This was as of the day that we built this deck. I think it was a week ago. At the time, they had 5,050 total followers of the company. So any content that Boast put out at that time, it would actually only be seen by 5,000 or have the opportunity to be seen by 5,000 people at a time. The total network reach of the employees is significantly beyond that. So when you look at how we all absorb content and information online, we seem to pay more attention to those that we're actually connected with and trust and that kind of thing. So the idea of really leveraging your employees to increase your visibility, it's not really a matter of if or should. It's a matter of why are we not doing it, or how could we be doing it more effectively? Because the numbers just make sense to leverage those employees to do it. But I think this data was from Google. When we look at the broad strokes of things, there's only about 3% of employees in general that regularly share organizational content through their networks. And often that's because they just don't know what's happening. They don't know what is okay to share. They're not necessarily on social media every day thinking, hey, how can I help my company increase their overall visibility in general? So when you look at the opportunity here, that's a really big gray pizza. When that blue slice is really the one that makes the most impact to your business. So when you look at the data, employees in general have about 10 times more connections than a company has as followers. And that data is a bit old, but the premise still remains the same. Employees drive typically 2 times the engagement on shares than a company does. And that's ultimately because of the personal connection that the individuals have with their friends and colleagues and all that kind of stuff. And socially engaged employees are more optimistic, inspired, connected, and tenured in general. So your employee base really is your best opportunity and your best channel to get your message out. I'm not suggesting that your company should not also share information, but in terms of who's actually going to care about it, they're going to care about it more so when it comes from your employees as opposed to some kind of faceless corporation in general. So we're now living in a world, and this world has changed a lot in the last 15 months. If I want to have, fish tacos delivered to my door in the next 30 minutes, there's an app for that. If I want to watch a movie from my childhood, there's an app for that. So if I have to go through a complicated process where I have to, phone somebody and dial off a menu and blah, 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 I'm just not going to do it. So knowing in the HR world, we're just pulled in so many different directions and we have so many different priorities. Having an easy process for adoption is super key. And what I'm going to walk you through is a simple 5-step process that's basic B2B email marketing automation that you can use and introduce to your employee base in order to really simplify your sharing program and make it as efficient as possible. So what it comes down to, typically we leverage MailChimp. And I'm going to give you a really tactical example for one of the programs we've set up for one of our client organizations. It's a company out of Norway, actually, that's just opening an office in Montreal. And what they're involved with is building humanoid robots. It's very Black Mirror. It's kind of creepy, but it's super cool. But the core of it is, if you're going to do this, if you're going to try and leverage your employee engagement for good, it really has to start from the top. So what we suggest is have one of your C-levels send out an all-staff email and say, hey, everyone, we're launching this employee insider program. Here's the reason why. If you want to buy into it, fantastic. If you don't worry about it. And that really gets you into the core of leveraging people that actually want to be part of this thing, as opposed to that prescriptive, you must do this, please do it sort of thing. So this is just an example of an email invitation from a C-level from an internal account email. And then where that leads, should they click that button, join the Insider program, is something that's really familiar to all of us. We've all filled out some sort of lead page on a website at some point. But this is really getting commitment. If someone's going to put their credentials in there, it gives them the chance to put their company account. It gives them their chance to put their personal account. It really adds a more human element towards, do I want to be part of this thing? And then it goes into an automated email cycle. So you have this welcome. Here's what you're going to see over the next few weeks. How do I get started? Do we have any open jobs that we're recruiting for? Is there any sort of company information that we want to share or celebrate? And really get into a cycle where you can pick how often these emails go out. Maybe it's daily. I wouldn't recommend daily, actually. Maybe it's a weekly email. Maybe it's every 2 to 5 days, something like that. But it could be just little tips on, hey, everyone, here's how we operate our referral program. Here's how you can help us bring in net new talent to the business. Here's how we do our social shares. If you want more information, let me know. Maybe you have a company hashtag program, and here's how it works. Maybe we have a need for more Google reviews or Glassdoor reviews or Indeed reviews. Here's a how-to email on the ways that you can impact the business and help us out overall in general. And then what it really comes down to is if you're going to email your employees on a 5-day or a 7-day or a 4-day, whatever the cadence is, what it comes down to is what sort of content should you include in those messages. And something that we've had a lot of fun, a lot of success with, is basically telling employee stories. So this is Casey from Haloti, and it was really about how did she get her start in the robotics industry in general. And knowing that we're now living in a world where I think we've added 6 new people to the team in the last 6 months, and I have no idea how tall my teammates are. And that just seems weird, but it's the world we're in. So telling these employee stories to the employee base really does bring people together, and it kind of highlights things that we didn't know about each other. So getting into some sort of monthly newsletter or bi-weekly newsletter, whatever, it does have a lot of impact on bringing the team together. And it doesn't recreate those water cooler moments that we would have if we were back in the office. But the communication cycle is really important because it just continues that conversation in the world that we're in now. So you may be asking, what's in it for the employee? And the reality is, advocacy is just as beneficial to the company as it is for the employee. I'm sure you've sat in sessions today where people need to feel purpose. They need to feel tied to the mission, the activities of the business in general. But raising the visibility of people raises your company visibility, but it also helps your employees build their own credibility and network. And that only helps your business. I know I do get questions quite often saying, well, if one of my employees gets a lot of visibility, won't it just make them more appealing to recruiters? And my response to them is, well, sure, but what are you doing to keep that person happy and saying no to those recruiters? Like, it's pretty straightforward. But they can also keep up with industry trends and things that they may not be seeing that you can really kind of add value to their lives. And at the end of the day, it allows your company to scale more efficiently, scale faster. And the types of content don't need to be complicated. What I've found over the years is human interest content typically scales the best. No one really cares when you just put out a post saying, we're hiring a software developer. No kidding, everyone's hiring a software developer. But when you send out messages and content that really celebrates people in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a welcome to the team, an employee highlight, this is Casey, this is what she cares about, here's how she started out in this industry, or exciting company news in general, when you layer in those new job opportunities, it really makes a difference, because if all you're pushing out there is job postings, no one cares. If you're creating that emotional bond with people and with your organization's brand in general, the new job opportunities, as they're sprinkled in, tend to get more traction in general. So the types of content don't need to be overly complicated. I do find that the human interest stories are the most impactful, but this is something where it's really easy to partner with your marketing department and just get into a cycle of every time there's a new hire, get a photo of the new employee if they're comfortable with it, get a quote from them, and then push it out. One thing that you can look at if you do create one of these programs is rewarding and communicating consistently with your employees. So if you have provided opportunity for them to share and you're asking them to share, make sure they know what the impact is they've made on your business goals in general. So maybe that means, because of this program, we've seen our website traffic increase by X% on the careers page. People hate going in black holes, and if you ask them to do something and they never see any sort of change, they're just not going to keep doing it. So openly communicating about the outcomes that the activity has created is super important. You can celebrate that in the newsletter, and if you want to create a rewards program to kind of help drive consistency, whether it be swag, a day off, gift cards, whatever, that makes a big impact as well. So at the end of the day, the impacts of implementing some sort of insider program, this is not just about employee referrals. This is about increasing your company's visibility in reach in all aspects. When you go to your people and they see the stories, they see the impact that they're making that has ties to retention and engagement. And at the same time, because of that increased visibility, it improves your ability to hire more great people, whether that be through headhunting or organic applications. And at the end of the day, it's a great news story. So we've done this with a bunch of companies. I think it's maybe 30 companies in the last 3 years or so. We've seen a ton of impact from an organic perspective. This doesn't cost a ton of money. You're probably already using some sort of email marketing automation in general. And it's a really, really simple 5-step process. So really curious to hear any questions you have, and happy to answer as best I can.
Great. Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate that. I mean, obviously, but I'm a huge fan of yours, and employer branding is a lot of things, that I do in my work as well. But we do have a couple of questions. I've got some questions here. I've actually used paper. I never have paper on me, but I'm using paper today. Okay. But so we got a bunch of questions here. So let's start with the first question with Amy Davies has a really good question. Her question is, what made you choose MailChimp over other platforms like Constant Contact, ConvertKit, or others?
That's it? That's the question?
What? Sorry?
Sorry, I thought I saw you keep moving, but I didn't hear. Your audio cut out a little bit for me. So why we chose MailChimp?
Yeah, so why did you choose MailChimp as your platform versus other platforms like Constant Contact and so on? I think you had a forum. I think that was where her question came on. If you want, we could have Amy come on screen and just share more information.
Sure. Yeah. So in that specific case, that just happened to be the email marketing automation the company already had in place. It really doesn't matter which one. I think MailChimp in general, I think the lowest account is like $20 a month. So it was a scenario where the company was already using it from a BD standpoint, and we just retooled it for the internal purpose. I think most of these services offer pretty much the same thing. If a company is already using one, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is the next question from Jasmine. A really good question, which is one of mine too. Do you have any recommendations on how to reframe the communication strategy for Slack-focused companies, i.e. those do not use or reference email for most of communication? So that's obviously a big thing nowadays, right? Companies are trying to reduce the amount of email that they're sending internally, so they're using social collaboration tools. So what's your thought about that?
So I every morning when I wake up and I open my laptop, the last thing I want to do is look at my email because I get a ton of it. So what I'd recommend is if you are a Slack first or a collab tech first sort of organization, then communicate through the channel that your people are paying attention to. When you get into the automation cycle for those tools, there's a lot of different ways that you can sync different apps to make this thing happen at the same time. So it doesn't need to be the specific tech. It needs to be the tech that works for you. So the more important thing is communicating with your employees and communicating with your employees in a regular cadence. So everyone wants transparency. You have to determine how much transparency you want to give. So do you really want to show the net new delta in your careers page traffic on a monthly basis? Maybe, maybe not. But pick the information that is important to you and your employees, and use the tools that make sense for you.
Okay. Yeah, but excellent advice, because obviously, every company is different, right? So it really has to do with their, preferences. And if you use email, then, use it. If you're using Slack, great. If you're using, Microsoft Teams, which I hope you're not, but if you are out there, then fine. But yeah, so there's an excellent question here from Courtney. What do you think are some of the main differences of rolling out an employee insider program with a small company versus large?
Great question. So when you look at a small company, I'm going to use some numbers here, Jeff. If you look at a small company of, say, 10 people versus 100 versus 10,000 sort of thing. In a 10-person company, you would almost demand that all 10 are highly, highly, highly engaged, and they know their livelihood is based on the success of that business. So a 10-person company, you're more easily going to be able to get people to buy in. Once you get to the 100 or 250 kind of ballpark, that number probably goes down to about 50%. And that's something where setting your expectations and setting your business goals associated with the program in general, your expectation has to change, because you're just not going to get 250 people in this program. Lots of people, I don't even have a Facebook account. There's no way I'm going to share social content on Facebook when I'm not even comfortable being on Facebook in the first place. So when you scale that out to a 10,000 person company, setting different targets and expectations would be critical, because it's really hard to have a really sense of ownership when you're part of a big company. You can certainly own your subject, own your niche, but it's just a different feeling. So what I'd suggest the differences is the expectation in buy-in overall, and the smaller the company, likely the more dependent the person is on the success of everyone, versus the big massive company where if someone else's project doesn't succeed, that doesn't mean that their job's at risk, sort of thing. So I think the biggest difference is expectation of rollout and buy-in.
Yeah, because obviously getting 35,000 people at a bank to all buy in is pretty low. I mean, that not happening, right? Okay. And then obviously, if you're a 25-person company, but each person buy-in is huge.
It's massive. It's absolutely massive. Yeah, for sure.
So this leads me to my next question, actually, is about, you talked earlier about what's in it, for employees. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how many times I've racked my brain about this question, because, in my 21-year career, I have probably spent more time in trying to persuade staff, employees, this is beneficial to you, but even if it is, and they have a clear understanding of that, getting them to hit the button, to hit share, or spend any amount of time on it is really hard. So how do you, deal with that?
So it's a great point. And I think I'm going to say this is a simple but not easy task. There are some people that simply will not do it, and that's A-okay. There's some people that will do everything you ask of them. If you say, Jeff, you go to one of your employees and say, pick up my dry cleaning, there's some people that will. The people in the middle are the one that just need inspiration, education, and empowerment. Okay. And if you can identify an emotional connection with that employee as to how they can actually make a positive impact to the business via a strategy like this, and then you educate them on how, and then empower them to, you have a chance of winning them. The big thing for me is it has to be an organic buy-in, as opposed to a prescriptive, you must do this. As soon as it kind of feels like a duty as opposed to a desire, you're done. Having expectations that you're just not going to win everyone up front, and then creating the environment where it's more of a buy-in versus a demand is super important.
So that makes sense. So that actually leads me to my next question about quantity of content. So obviously, there's probably some sort of a rule of thumb that you might have, and so if it's like a weekly newsletter or bi-weekly, whatever it is, and how many pieces of content would you say is appropriate for people to be sharing on a weekly basis?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. The number of pieces of content that you're sharing through your employees, or the number of pieces of content that your employees are sharing in general?
Both, because ultimately, if I have 10 fresh new pieces of content every week, and I want people to share 10 every week, I don't think that's really doable. So that's why I'm just wondering.
So I'm a big believer in relationships from the perspective of a bank account. In that you have to make deposits into that relationship bank account before you can make withdrawals. So asking an employee to share a blog a day, a newsletter a day, a job posting a day, all that stuff, you're basically asking your employee to turn their social profile into like a news station. Like, that's not productive. I think what you should do is, in that initial buy-in period, describe openly and transparently what the goals of the program are and what you're hoping to achieve as a result of that. So as soon as you start asking your employees to share this blog every single day, all that ends up happening is it's just a blog channel. That's it. I think in the initial period, like one a week to your employees in the deposit bank equals one a day to the outbound thing. But it can't be the same content over and over and over again, because if that's the case, people just stop paying attention and it's not impactful.
So there's one thing about sharing content, but there's another on the receiving end of that content in terms of a call to action. So, and that's been one of the things, that I looked at, and I look at, content, employers share through the employees, but, there's no call to action anyway. So what is your thought on that, and how should companies sort of, position their call to action to frame that?
So it depends on what the source content is in the first place. So like if you're asking your employees for referrals, for example, there should be a very clear call to action, so the employee knows exactly what happens if I hit click or I do this thing. If it's something where the company is hosting a webinar or a sales-oriented presentation in some form, there should be some sort of specific and direct call to action in that. If it's just an announcement, say for example, your company just brought in 25 million in Series A, whatever.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily need to be a call of action. That could just be an announcement, like, hey everyone, I work for Jeffco, and we just won 25 million in investment, and I'm really excited. So I think it really comes down to what is the source content in the first place. If you don't give someone clear direction, then you're kind of leaving ambiguity to make that decision. So if it's something where you're asking for a specific activity and outcome, you need to give a CTA for sure.
Right. Okay. So the one thing that I know that is also, by the way, audience, I know that I'm asking all of these questions, which I'm totally able to do. But if you have any more questions, so we've had 3 so far from, the audience. If you really want to challenge Big Tall John, you can actually raise your hand and come on stage and challenge him. So we
let's go, yeah.
Yeah, but John is nursing a bit of a injury right now. She did. No, okay, bad. Okay, so
we're not actually going to get in like a fisticuffs scenario here.
Oh, okay, that's fine. So I do have a question though about writing. So on the inside of program side of things,
yeah,
people are not naturally great writers, and sure. I would even take it further to say that HR professionals and the recruiters are not great writers, right? Yep. And that's fine because that's not their training and so on. So what would you suggest if an organization is going to start something like this?
Yep.
Would you suggest that they do it themselves, reach out to people, certain expertise?
So this is a gut instinct, and I'd love to be challenged on this. I think if an organization has invested enough to hire an HR professional, chances are they already have 1 or 2 marketing pros as well. So this is something where you don't need to reinvent the wheel for every piece of content, but if you partner with your marketing department and say, I'd like to have templates created for these 5 purposes, then it's just a simple matter of anyone can do a Q&A. Like Jeff, I can send you an email with 5 questions and say, can you give me your feedback so we can turn it into content? So it doesn't need to be overly engineered. You definitely do need to make friends with the marketing team, and they can turn around a template project very well from a creative standpoint, likely better than any of us in this room. But then it comes down to just condensing the content and collecting the content, and that can be templated. That's super easy.
Or they can just hire you, right?
Well, if they want to, sure, yeah.
Okay. All right, that's a bit of a plug there for John's company. So we do have a question here from Jasmine. So thank you. So how do we figure out what programs and activities are most impactful if employees are not clear themselves? I.e., if employees want mentoring but don't know what mentoring they need, coaching, soft skills. How can we best build a mentoring program? I'm not sure I understand the question. Jasmine, do you want to come on stage? We've got about less than 5 minutes. If you want to come on stage, you can, clarify your question with John. You don't have to. All you have to do is just hit the hand sign at the bottom, and we can gladly have you on stage. No?
I think
I'm not, yeah.
from what I understood of that question, I think asking your employees for clarity on what they're looking for mentorship wise. There's tons of different like LinkedIn Learning. There's courses. Oh, we have Jasmine here.
Yeah, it'll take a few seconds for her video to pop up or whatever, but then
I don't know who in the audience has the Grover image, but that's awesome.
Yeah, we've got some pretty funky images going on. Jasmine, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Hi, I have my camera off, that's why you can't see me. This has been really great, John. Yeah, my question was more around, we're a fairly small company. A lot of our employees are junior. And so, they say that they want to be mentored, but they don't quite know what it is, either because of lack of exposure to a mentoring program or just varying skills. So we're trying to figure out how to really narrow down what sort of program would be most effective.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand the question, you're seeking clarity on how to identify mentorship programs for employees that aren't necessarily clear on what mentorship they want?
Yeah, and I'm using this as an example. It could be anything that a company wants to roll out for employees for engagement, but they don't quite know how they want to be engaged, if that makes sense.
Understood. Okay, I think I understand now. So I think in that case, I'm a big believer in. And I ran into a situation like this with one of my employees that's early career the other day. Is really understanding from their perspective what they feel they're missing. And there's a difference between a mentor and a coach. And on the mentorship side, it's really more, I find, to be more subject matter specific, as opposed to the coach being more someone that asks you questions. So if what they're seeking is truly personal development, what I'd recommend you do with them is ultimately ask them to think about what success would look like for them in terms of a solution that you can help facilitate. So maybe it's a scenario where what they're really looking for is an enhanced tactical skill. Maybe it's more visibility into the business. Maybe it's more soft skill. I want to know how to communicate more effectively with my leaders and that kind of stuff. When someone comes with a really ambiguous question, it's really hard to give them specific feedback in return. But I'm really a big fan in asking people, I don't really understand what you're asking of me. Can you help me kind of understand what that is and what it looks like?
Got it. Thanks so much.
Yep, no problem.
Great, thank you, Jasmine. Okay, I think that is going to be our last question. So we're out of time. So I just want to thank everybody, and I want to thank you, John, for being here. Obviously, I'm a big fan of yours, and obviously for people here in the session, if you want to learn more about John and his company, Pivot and Edge, you can go to their trade show booth here and check them out. I believe Tyler is probably there, and or might be there. Maybe he's sleeping. But John will be around. You can chat. with them afterwards. So thank you very much for being here. We have a 5-minute break, and then we're going to be coming back with our final wellness session at 20 after 3. So thank you, everyone. And
Thanks, guys.